You look fabulous. Look at
Yeah.
you. I'm ready for my close-up.
Okay, what are we doing here? Okay. Hello, Diantha.
Hi, Marcel.
Who we got today?
Well, we have Jessica Janniere. Welcome to 50% with Marcel Combs, my good friend and mentor. I'm Diantha Grattan, and on this podcast, she will travel a journey of leadership with each guest as she analyzes the ingredients that lead women to their current role. Marcel's goal is for you to walk away with tools to support your very own journey, no matter where your current destination is today. She lives in Brooklyn, New York.
She does live in Brooklyn. She actually was born in Germany.
Yes.
And then, as a 6-year-old, came to the United States and has had a real struggle. Grew up in poverty, abuse, and now she has her mission in life.
Her mission, I think, is what she was meant to really do with her life, and her story is incredible. Marcel, as a 6-year-old, speaking only German, comes to New York City and has to go to our American schools. So they're going to really, really value her story.
Oh, I think so too. Welcome, Jessica, to 50% with Marcel Combs.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
I know, it's great to have you here. You are a friend of mine, so I know that we're going to love listening to your story and hearing about your life.
I am excited. Thanks for having me again.
Yes, I usually love to start with you just telling us about your journey. You can start wherever you want and tell us kind of how you got to what you're doing today.
Wow. Well, my journey started. Yeah, my journey started in Germany. I actually was born in Germany and I lived on a farm the first 6 years of my life. And it was really significant because my grandparents raised me during those years. I have a bipolar mom who really struggled a lot in her younger years. And at the time she was pregnant with me, she was seeking an abortion and she could not find a doctor to perform it. And so she was
Wow.
forced to birth me. And so my grandparents stepped in and they became my parents for those first 6 years. And then my mom had remarried and took me to America at the age of 6. So that was quite tragic at that age.
What part of the US did she take you to?
She brought me right to New York City.
Okay.
New York
All
City,
right.
which is where I currently am now. But that's really where the journey started. And there were a lot of different things that happened when we came to the United States. Here I am, an immigrant child in a new family, trying to adjust to a new culture. I'm in a new school where I don't know the language. I'm really the minority student in the school. And so that created a lot of challenges. And I was one of 5 siblings. The dynamic of my family was not really good. My stepfather was an alcoholic. Again, my mom had a lot of mental health issues. So, me as the eldest, I had to step in and become the leader of the home. I had to look after my siblings. And we also grew up in poverty, which meant that I had to work at a very young age to kind of help with some of the financial need. And so I started packing bags at 12 years old at a local grocery store. And I became a really good bagpacker that my line was so long. People wanted to get on that line and get their groceries back by Jessica. And I made a lot of tips for a 12-year-old. And then at 13 years old, I worked as a call taker at a taxi stand. Now, this was interesting because I was already transitioning to high school. I did this for about a year, maybe a little bit over a year. And I would go to school. I would work at the taxi stand from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning. So I did 12-hour shifts
Wow.
at $3 an hour.
And how old were you when you started?
I was 13, just turning 14.
Wow, I didn't even know that was legal.
It's not legal. It was an off the books job. And at the end of the week, I received a white envelope with all of these single dollar bills. And I thought that I had made it. Like,
I bet.
yeah, and then the next year, I was selected for a program called the Summer Youth Employment Program here in New York City, which helps low income youth get placed in places of business where you learn job skills, you learn life skills, and that program changed the trajectory of my life. It placed me in a nursing home. What was interesting was I didn't know this at the time, but because I was separated from my Oma and Opa in Germany, my grandparents, the nursing home became a very special place to me. I developed relationships with all of the seniors there. I love being there. My coworkers became my family. The residents became my family. And honestly, it became home away from home. I didn't enjoy being home because of the dysfunction and the abuse. My neighborhood wasn't safe. It was very drug ridden. There was just a lot of things, a lot of elements that were challenging. So being in that nursing home really, really helped me in more ways than one. And I learned incredible job skills. I was able to be creative working in recreation therapy. I loved event planning, and I stayed in that industry actually for about a decade. And I worked my way up from this little summer youth employment worker to becoming a top director of recreational therapy in New York City at about 22 years old.
Wow, that's amazing.
It really is amazing. And when I look back, I just think about how rich my experiences were during those years. I mean, I met people who were Holocaust survivors. As a teenager, I was able to sit on their bed and listen to their stories, as tragic as they were. I was able to sit with nurses. I was able to sit with nurses who had overcome the racism in the southern parts of the country where there were blacks only, whites only signs. And she was able to become one of the first African American registered nurses in her county. And she had to care for people who didn't even like her because of the color of her skin. And so hearing these stories at 14, 15, 16 years old really, really expanded my mindset and my world of my view of the world, and really taught me so many lessons. So that was for about a decade. Then I moved into parenthood, and I got married, met my husband. We had a family. I'm now in a place where I'm involved in a network marketing company. So I had left my job. I resigned from my event planning and director of recreation position, and I'm home with my kids, which we felt was best because we didn't want anyone else raising our children, especially with the trauma that we experienced. We didn't really trust anyone. And here in New York, it's just super expensive to pay for childcare. So we said, okay, I'm going to just stay home with the kids. Well, I ended up joining a network marketing company. And during that time, I just wanted to make an extra $500 a month to put my kids in a private Christian school that was local. And I did that. We did that. We did that. However, God was preparing me for the work that I'm doing today. And I didn't know it at the time. I mean, I was in network marketing. I was the least likely to succeed because I was the most shy. I was the most withdrawn. I used to sit in the back of the training rooms. And during that time, I found a mentor who really, really saw something in me that I did not see in myself. And it has been an incredible journey thus far. And today I am the CEO of Look Up and Beyond Inc., which is a award-winning personal development organization. And through speaking, training, and coaching, I am blessed to inspire and equip individuals and organizations to live and to thrive on the other side of adversity. I'm able to share my personal story of overcoming adversity and build it into my leadership trainings. And it's just an incredible honor to do this type of work.
And so is this your company?
Yes.
Look Up and Beyond? So you started this
Yes.
yourself? Wow, that's great.
Thank you. Yes, that was something that I did not know I was going to be an entrepreneur. I had no desire to be an entrepreneur. And that's the irony. And then on top of that, I'm doing things that I was like terrified to do. Public speaking, getting in front of large crowds, being on stage in front of the room. That's how I know it's a God thing, because I would have never selected this on my own.
Oh my goodness. So I know you work with a lot of women, right, with mental health challenges. And so, how do you think your upbringing impacted you with having that desire, Jessica?
Well, because I've experienced so much trauma, and there were so many seasons in my life where I did not have anyone who I felt could relate to my story, or that I didn't feel comfortable sharing my story with. There was a sense of shame attached to a lot of my experiences. And at the time, I didn't know, but a lot of my traumatic events shaped a false identity in me. And so I wanted to be someone who is known as a healer, as someone who creates spaces and places where people can show up and be authentic, where they would have um, just the permission to share and be transparent and not be afraid of judgment. There's a lot of healing that happens when you, number one, hear stories that resonate with you. And I found that the most powerful healing moments that I've experienced on my personal growth journey came when people who were on stage, who were on a podcast, who were on television, when they told it raw, and they were honest, they were transparent, and they were vulnerable. And those were the moments that I'm like, wow, I connect with this person, and I want to be that person. So there is this desire, because I want to provide something I didn't have. It's the same thing when I work with young people. I want to be that mentor that I wish I had when I was a teenager.
So you mentioned that you had a mentor come along who saw something in you that you didn't see yourself. Do you have a continuing relationship with that
Oh
person?
yes, we serve in ministry together now, and he is part of our family. He's a pastor. So when I met him, he was just a business person. He was a what they would call in network marketing an upline leader, someone who you refer to for questions about how to build your business. And he was a man of faith. And initially, when I met him, I was taken aback because of how he really lived out his faith in the business world. I thought that it was very extra, very unnecessary, and I was very offended, to be honest with you, at the time. I was not a Christian, I was not a person of faith. And here I am, a young woman in my mid late 20s, young mom, trying to figure out how to have this marriage, have this family, how to move forward, with this vision, this dream. I'm seeing the potential in this network marketing company. I'm like, okay, I'm making a little money and I just want to make some money. I'm not here for all the religious talk. So he would close his business meetings with prayer. And I remember like really having the audacity to ask him not to do that. And I just remember how he was so gracious. And he was like, I understand how you feel. And this is why I do this. And he really straightened me up in a very gentle and loving and respectful way. And yet he didn't compromise, he didn't bend. And I just began to watch him, and he was very consistent in the way he lives out his values. And over time, I began to trust him. He began to hear about my story. He took my husband and I under his wing. And again, he became what I call affectionately Papa Plumber. He went from being Pastor Plumber to Papa Plumber. And he saw something in me where he would invite me to step up in front of the room and to do a training. And mind you, My knees are shaking. My stomach is nauseous. I'm breaking out in hives and sweats. Like, it's obvious I'm nervous. And he just kept calling me to the front of the room any chance he could. And he would just say to me, Jessica, you have an incredible story. God has a purpose for you. You're just being prepared and developed for something. What you're doing now is just a stepping stone. And he's been so consistent over 15 years in my
Yeah.
life. And it's just been incredible.
Truly remarkable in this day and age, right?
It really is.
Mental illness is just such a hard lifetime issue, and you have siblings in this whole process or journey. Have you been able to help your siblings in a way?
Well, the family dynamic is always complicated.
Now that's true.
It's
Yeah.
always complicated. And the
Yes.
reason that is because sometimes you want things more for people than they want for themselves. And
Yeah.
it's a very painful thing when you have family members or when you have people that you love that you know what they've experienced because you were there with them.
Mhm.
However, you've put in the work to rise above it, and much of it is God's grace. I don't say in any way, shape, or form like, oh, look at me, I did all of this. It has been the grace of God. And I did put in a lot of work on myself through the years, and I continue to do that. And when I look at people who I love, whether it's my siblings, whether it's extended family, maybe people who I grew up with in the neighborhood, who understood and knew the dysfunction and the abuse that was happening in my home, and many of them were dealing with similar circumstances. What I know is that you have to be a willing participant in your own rescue. You have to. And when I learned that having a victim mentality was never going to move me forward, and I decided that I was going to take full responsibility for my life, even for unfair things, even things I had no control of, things that should never have happened, it really, really empowered me to keep moving forward. And that's especially true when I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew what I did not want.
Yeah. Sometimes it's more important to know what you don't want than it is to know what you do want.
I would agree with that. Yes.
There's a lot of people, or there's a lot of talk out there on how you break the cycle of poverty. And it's that whole big, it's a hard thing. I grew up in rural Texas. And so I can't even imagine, growing up in New York City or Brooklyn, because it's such a different world. But I mean, are there key things when you look at that? Of course, at 12 years old, you're working at a taxi stand, right? 13?
I was backpacking at 12 and 13. I was at the taxi stand. Yeah.
12 hours every night, 6P to 6A. Yeah. I mean, that's big on your part. But I mean, if you're trying to work with someone who is trying to put in the work and trying to get out of that cycle, are there key things that you try to work with them on?
Yeah, so the dynamic of poverty is very complex because poverty in and of itself is very traumatic. And there's poverty and then there's poverty. Like, and what I mean by that is when it impacts the quality of your life to a point where you are unsafe and you're not able to progress forward, that's a whole different level versus living from paycheck to paycheck and your basic needs are met. Now, at the time when we were growing up, we did not have some of our basic needs met at different times. And I remember as a child feeling hungry, looking for food. I remember going 3 winters without heat and hot water and having to boil water to bathe, to go to school. And I remember not having electricity at certain times where we would put our food on the fire escape during the winter because the freezer didn't have power. I mean, you're talking like really times of struggle. And then you add the dynamic of a mentally ill mom, an alcoholic stepfather, abuse happening, domestic violence. We were raised during the height of the crack epidemic here in New York City. So a lot of my peers, their parents were struggling and addicted to crack. And so I was a witness to that. And many of my peers, when I would go to their homes, their cabinets were empty, their refrigerators were empty, their little siblings had no clothes on and were running around in dirty diapers because mom was smoked out. So this stuff was all happening around the same time. And when we talk about poverty, we can't neglect to talk about the emotional and mental stress and trauma that it inflicts on people. And this idea of just working hard. By the grace of God, I've always had a work ethic. And I believe it stems from this idea that if I just work hard, I can get out of this. If I can just work hard enough, I can turn it around. Well, the older I got, and I'm still working hard, I'm realizing, yes, hard work is valuable, but it's not enough. It's not what breaks the cycle. It's not what breaks the chain. There's a lot of different dynamics. So for people who are in that pursuit, it's not this response that I could give that's just like, hey, ABC 1, 2, 3. I really believe that a lot of coming out of poverty has to do more with me working harder on myself than on the job or the career or the business that I'm trying to grow and elevate in. I have to work harder on myself because that gives me an opportunity to know myself, know my strengths, build my confidence, gives me the ability to learn skills that put me in places where I can work and collaborate with people. It gives me the ability to learn financial literacy. But you can have all the financial literacy you want, but if you don't have the belief factor, the confidence, if you haven't dealt with some of those traumas, oftentimes you're going to end up in a self-sabotaging cycle while you're in the pursuit of getting out of poverty. So I really believe very heavily, and I've experienced this myself, you have to work harder on yourself than you do on trying to, quote unquote, get out of poverty.
Now, did you do formal education or was this all on the job?
Yeah, I did a little bit of both. I graduated from a community college when I first met my husband. I was actually a young mom. I started working on my bachelor's degree. By the time I had my third child, I said, you know what? I don't really know what I want to do. Like I was really unsure. So again, around this time, I was not a person of faith. I didn't have that relationship with God. I didn't know what my purpose was. My husband and I, we were struggling because now we're a young couple. We have 3 children. I just left my full-time job where I was making more money than him. I'm in college. He's working overtime to get me through college. And I'm like, this is not going to work because why am I here? I'm not going to just keep spending all this money for a degree to get the better job with the better benefits when I don't even know if that's what I want to do. So I quit. I quit college while I was going for my bachelor's. And when I was in the network marketing company, I was introduced to personal development. And when I was introduced to personal development, that's when I became a real student. And I learned more in personal development than I did in college. And I became a student of life. And I, over the years, have invested in conferences and courses and books and programs, and they have served me well.
Goodness, how old are your children now, Jessica?
All my children are now 23, 21,
Wow.
and next week my youngest will be 19.
Oh my goodness. So
They're
you
all young
kind of
adults.
raised them. Yes, they're all young adults.
Yes,
So,
and they're wonderful.
oh, so if you had to go back and have a talk with your young self, what advice would you give her? What you did right, what you did wrong, what you, if you could rewind, would you do anything differently? Now, some of your circumstances happened to you, which weren't in your control, of course.
Yeah, honestly, when I look back at my life, because I know the purpose that I'm called to now, and I see how those pain points in my life serve a greater purpose and they connect me with people and they really equip me to be very effective in what I do, I wouldn't change anything. I don't have any regrets. I know that every season of life, I did the best that I could given the cards I was dealt. I've always been the type of person who was very hopeful until I wasn't, but really strive to remain hopeful, to remain positive, to treat people the way that I would want to be treated, despite the fact that I had these circumstances and these challenges. And to be honest with you, many people who would know me for any length of time had no idea that I had these traumatic experiences because it's not something that you can see based on how I carry myself. I've learned from a young age to hide my pain really well. And that was not always a good thing. Let's just put that out there. It was not always a good thing. But when I learned to give myself permission to be vulnerable and to learn that I didn't have to hide myself, I knew that I was doing it because it was the only way that I could cope at the time. And so, again, a lot of times we live with regret. And yet, if we really unpack the regret and we say, okay, was I doing the best that I could at the time with the knowledge I had, with my mentality at the time, with the circumstances? And most of us would say, yes, I was doing the best that I could. And I believe that when you can say that, you are free to live beyond regret. There's a peace about that. So I don't have any regrets. I mean, I wish I had a childhood sometimes. I look at my kids and I missed out on a childhood. I had to grow up. I recently went to Disney World for the first time with my daughter, my oldest child, and then my youngest son. And I was at a leadership conference in Orlando, and they joined me for a couple of days, and we took a day to go to Disney World. And when I was there, I cried. I cried. And I cried because the little Jessica in me wished that she had experienced that as a child. And I was grateful that I was able to experience it with two of the three of my children. And I just said, wow, God, look how far we've come. Thank you for blessing me with this time and this experience.
My daughter works at Disney World, so I frequent there a whole lot. A whole lot I frequent there. Talk to us about your Triad of Resilience model.
So the Triad of Resilience model is a model that I designed when I was doing a lot of trainings and teachings about how to engage and connect with young people. So a lot of the work that I do is professional development, working with individuals who may also work with young people. And the Triad of Resilience says you need 3 different elements to really connect with the heart of young people, to speak the language of today's youth, to really get them to a place where they have an interest in hearing what you have to say. And that is based on communication, understanding how to communicate with them, knowing that young people are driven by the world of social media, by the world of tech, by visual things. Understanding that when you communicate well with them, you now have an opportunity to connect with their heart. And when you have an opportunity to connect with their heart, now there's an opportunity for you to bring them into a community that can support them and really rally around them to push them forward. So that's really kind of the premise of that model.
And I read that you speak a lot on some of the research that you're doing. So what are you always inquisitively looking at?
I am always looking at human behaviors and particularly in the area of leadership development. I'm very fascinated about what really, really inspires people to rise up and become a leader, become a positive person of influence. I'm also very fascinated about seeing people and seeing what people need to reframe trauma and utilize it for something triumphant. I'm very fascinated by watching the process an individual goes through when they're on this search for purpose and for meaning in life that goes beyond, maybe education or beyond maybe motherhood or something of that nature. That really, really fascinates me. And so I spend a lot of time reading a lot of leadership books, doing a lot of psychology studies, really seeing, okay, what communicates with the heart? I'm fascinated by people's stories. I think that stories are powerful and they're bridge builders.
I agree. I obviously, since I have this podcast, my favorite thing is hearing people's story and trying to crawl around in there till I, at least in a short period of time, understand perhaps, where they're coming from, which is a crazy question I'm going to ask you, totally not really related to what we're talking about. But you came to the US and you were 6 years old and couldn't speak the language. So the question is, can you still speak
I
German?
cannot, no. And the reason I cannot is because my mom stopped speaking the language. And you have to remember, she was in a violent marriage. My stepfather would not allow her to speak the language because he felt intimidated by it. Yes. So she was not allowed to speak German in the house, which meant that I had no other German influence, no other German connections. And my stepfather also actually isolated us from my family in Germany. I wasn't reunited with my family in Germany until about 20 something years later. And that's a whole nother miraculous, God ordained story.
Well, now you've tantalized us, so you at least have to give us 5 minutes on that.
Well, the interesting thing was the time when I was looking to put my children in a private Christian school here in New York City. The headmaster of the school is a German pastor, Lutheran denomination. And what was interesting is that when him and his mom and his family heard my story, they were very, very fascinated, and they offered to write a letter on my behalf to my Oma, to my grandma. And so his mom took a 4 to 5 page letter that I wrote, translated it into German. We sent it to Germany, and my family, for the first time, was able to hear what life was like for me in America and what tragedy I had to endure. They actually sent me a plane ticket, and they had me come over and meet the whole family.
Oh, wow. So a lot of your family still lives in Germany even to this day. Have you been back again?
I've been back one other time since that first reunion. So I went back with my mom and my daughter, and that was a very, very powerful experience because there were 4 generations of us. So it was really a blessing. It was really nice.
When you think about leadership and what's important and the leadership lessons you've taught your children, can you sum those up for us?
I would say one of the most consistent messages that I have spoken into my children is, number one, always be the change you want to see. Always be the change you want to see. There's an issue, there's a situation. How can you contribute? What can you bring to the table? And I've always been that type of person. I'm very solution oriented. I believe in being solution focused and not focusing on the problems. I spent too much of my life focusing on the problem. And it was the reason I struggled with depression and mental health issues. And I realized that a lot of what we struggle with often is because of our mindset. And so be the change that you want to see. The other thing in terms of leadership is never stop learning and never stop learning who you are and who you have the potential to become. Because there's the only way that you will experience the richest and best moments of life is that you always have to demand a higher level from yourself. I am blessed to have a beautiful life. It is not perfect. I'm still doing the work to break generational traumas and circumstances, but I have such peace because I know that I'm not stopping here. There's more for me. Until the Lord calls me home, I'm going to keep growing. I'm going to keep learning. I'm going to keep showing up. And I strive to model that to my children. So anything that I've asked my children or even the young people that I mentor, because I have an incredible group of young people that I mentor, that I get to do life with and speak life into, I never ask them to do anything or expect them to do anything or encourage them to do anything that I'm not doing myself or that I'm not willing to do. So I have to be the one to lead from the front, always.
Great lessons.
Thank you.
Great lessons. We could have our politicians maybe memorize that too, to lead from the front.
Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast.
Oh yeah, no, I can't do that. There's enough of those people doing that. I just say we need a little more love and a little more understanding and a whole lot more leadership.
Yeah.
So, what excites you from today forward? What are you working on?
Well, I'm working on a lot of things. I'm working on myself. That's number one. I'm very excited about watching my children grow up and really discover their gifts and their purpose. You know, I've been very fortunate to, alongside my husband, who's been an incredible supporter. Him and I are getting ready to celebrate 22 years of marriage next month.
Well, congratulations. That's a feat in itself.
Thank you. It absolutely is. And he's an incredible guy. He has supported me and my biggest just prayer partner and supporter. And we both agree that what we've invested in our children, being able to see that fruit now or some of that fruit is one of the most rewarding things of our lives. And so we've been very blessed and fortunate to put 2 out of the 3 of our children through college.
That's a big accomplishment.
Our daughter graduated as a chef, culinary chef from Johnson and Wales, which was
Wow.
her dream school. So by the grace of God, she now works at a boarding school and is one of the head chefs there. Incredible young lady. And then our middle child, firstborn son, he's graduating from Binghamton as an engineer in May. So he's a couple of weeks away from walking down that aisle. And our youngest is an EMT. He has such a good head on his shoulders. I think he's going to probably start moving into the John Maxwell events because he reads a lot of personal growth books. He's got like a stack of books. Before he was reading 1 book a week. So the fact that they're young, they're focused, they're doing purposeful, meaningful things to me excites me because I'm like, they could be doing anything else in the world right now at this age.
That's wonderful. Well, I always kind of love to sum up the show by you telling us what your favorite books or podcast or audio books are. I know you listed a few, but what's your top 2?
Reading John's book, The High Road Leader. I started that. I'm reading another book on top strategies of 6-figure women. I'm reading that book right now. But in terms of the books that really influenced my growth and really catapulted me into higher levels of leadership, one of the books was Captivating by John and Stacey Eldridge. That book really, really changed my life. It's a faith-based book, but it really helped me to see myself the way that God does. The magic of thinking big revolutionized the way that I thought about my thoughts. If You Think You Can by T.J. Hoisington, another incredible book. The Battlefield of the Mind by Joyce Meyer changed my life. I still refer back to it. And then the John Maxwell Leadership Bible.
Well, Jessica, it's been so delightful to meet you and just get some short moments. I appreciate you taking the time to be on 50% with Marcel Combs. And Jessica, if people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
The best way to reach me is to look at my website, lookupandbeyond.com. That's all one word, lowercase, lookupandbeyond.com. I'm also on social media platforms like LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook.
Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be on 50% with Marcel Combs. Hopefully one day we'll meet face to face at one of John's events. And so until that day, I just enjoyed getting to know you a little bit.
Thank you. This was wonderful.
Thank you.